Hey guys, I'm going to do a video real quick. This one in regards to UFC Fight Night Vegas 71, Curtis Blaydes against Sergei Pavlovich. Let's get right into it. Starting off with Brad Tavares against Bruno Silva. Brad Tavares is 35 years old. He's 14-7 inside of the UFC, with 12 of those wins being by decision. He is coming off of a loss to Dricus du Plessis in his last fight, but aside from that, he's a pretty well-rounded fighter, but he is mainly a grappler from what we've seen. So I think he'll probably have the grappling advantage. He's probably going to look to go to the ground, but his opponent Bruno Silva is pretty damn good in the UFC. He's going to be 2 years younger than him. He has lost his last two fights against Gerald Meerschaert and Alex Pereira, but he gave Pereira a pretty close fight. And there were moments in his fight with Meerschaert where when you would see him pull the trigger, that's when he'd really start to get a little bit of momentum on his side. And as long as he's confident in his stand-up ability, I think he can win this fight. He's got a strong chin with big power in his hands, and he's got 19 knockouts, 3 decision wins, and 6 submission wins in his career. So he's also well-rounded. We did see him use some of his grappling against Alex Pereira, and I feel like he's going to be able to do enough to win this fight, and I think he's probably going to be able to even keep Tavares from taking him to the ground, at least not as much as Tavares will need to in order to win this fight. And I just feel like Bruno Silva's got it in this fight, so I'll be taking him. And on to the coming event, Song Yadong against Ricky Simon. Now, Ricky Simon's going to have a 3-inch reach advantage, along with having won his last 5 fights, including notable wins against Merab Dvalishvili, Ronnie Yaya, Ray Borg, Rafael Assunção, and in his most recent fight, taking Jack Shore's undefeated record. He's currently 8-2 inside of the UFC. He's well-rounded, but he may have the ground advantage, and I think he's probably going to look to grapple more in this fight, because his opponent, Song Yadong, is also very well-rounded, but definitely is more of a stand-up fighter. He's going to be 2 inches taller than Ricky Simon. Now, he is coming off of a loss against Corey Sandhagen in his last fight, but Corey Sandhagen, that guy's going to be a title contender and I think a future champion. But Song Yadong has notable wins over Marlon Moraes, Casey Kenny, Julio Arce, and Chito Vera. He's also 8-2 inside of the UFC. He does have 1 draw inside of the UFC too. Aside from that, he's well-rounded and very aggressive yet patient at the same time. Knows exactly when to push the pace and when not to. As we saw in the Corey Sandhagen fight, whenever he did start to push the pace, he was having a little bit of success. He was still getting pieced up, but he's still landing shots big enough that were doing damage that could possibly lead to him finishing the fight. But Song looked better than I think a lot of people expected him to look in that fight. And he definitely showed heart in that fight. And I think I'm going to take Song Yadong in this fight too. Plus, I think he'll have the stand-up advantage. I think he's a very overlooked prospect at this point, and I think he gets back on track with a win in this fight. So I'm going to take Song Yadong. And now for the main event, Sergei Pavlovich against Curtis Blaydes. Sergei's ranked 3 in the world, while Curtis is ranked number 4. Curtis is 17-3, while Sergei is 17-1. And Sergei's going to have a 4-inch reach advantage, but Blaydes will be 1 inch taller. Now, at this point in their respective careers inside of the UFC, Sergei's 6 fights in, while Curtis is 15 fights in. Obviously, Curtis has more experience than Sergei, but Sergei seems to have the better stand-up advantage in this fight, along with probably a power advantage in terms of the striking, but we've also seen Curtis get a lot better in terms of the striking as well. Curtis has notable wins over Jairzinho Rozenstruik, Alexander Volkov, Junior Dos Santos, Shamil Abdurakhimov, Alistair Overeem, Mark Hunt, Alexei Oleinik, and his only losses inside of the UFC have been to Francis Ngannou twice and Derek Lewis. 2 of the biggest power punchers inside the history of the entire heavyweight division. And he wanted a rematch with Derek Lewis, and he also wanted a 3rd fight with Francis, even going on to say that he was a little bit upset that Francis left the UFC, because he wanted that 3rd fight with Francis. Now, Sergei is on a 5-fight winning streak right now, all of them knockouts inside of the first round, and his 3 most recent being Shamil Abdurakhimov, Derek Lewis, and Tai Tuivasa. Now, Sergei definitely prefers to stand in these fights, and I do not think he's going to risk going to the ground with Curtis Blaydes. I know he's from Russia. I know he definitely is very good from what's been reported on the ground, but from what we've seen, I haven't seen enough to convince me that he can take on Curtis Blaydes in a wrestling match. So I think he's going to need to stay on the feet. But Curtis Blaydes' whole game when he first came into the UFC was getting you to the ground. He made it very known, I'm not here to entertain, I'm here to win. And the fans even disliked him for it. But now it's paying off. He's 12-3 inside of the UFC on a 3-fight winning streak, and he looks good every single time out. I think Curtis is going to definitely look for a takedown, as he usually does in his fights, but lately he has said that he's starting to fall in love with the striking a bit more and starting to want to do that a bit more against his opponents. But Curtis isn't an idiot. I don't think he's going to go out there and want to put on a striking match against Sergei Pavlovich. What he needs to do is he needs to keep Sergei at a distance, look to push him against the cage, clinch up, go for a takedown. What he needs to look out for, though, whenever they're on their feet, is Sergei Pavlovich likes to throw haymakers every now and then. But I'm talking occasionally, like maybe once every 30 to 45 seconds, he'll throw a wild haymaker out, and it's a big shot, but it will miss, or if it connects, you're rocked every time almost. And that's what Curtis needs to watch out for. That's why I think he needs to go to the ground immediately. I mean, the only 3 losses inside of Curtis's career have come by knockout. And so far, that is all Sergei Pavlovich has done inside of the UFC and outside of the UFC. A 17-1 record with 14 of those wins coming by first round knockout. So any time that he's ever left the first round, he's gone to a decision in his career. The one loss he has was whenever he came to the UFC and made his UFC debut against Alistair Overeem. And Alistair Overeem took a grappling approach to that fight, which is something that Curtis Blaydes specializes in. And even recently, Curtis came out and said that he was training with Alistair whenever he was getting ready to fight Sergei Pavlovich. The exact quote that Curtis went on to say was, "I was training with Alistair when he fought Sergei a few years ago and helped Alistair. I knew exactly where Alistair's grappling was at that time. I watched what he did to Pavlovich. He took him down and kind of manhandled him a bit. I'm a much better grappler than Alistair was at that stage." And I fully believe Curtis Blaydes. And I believe that Curtis Blaydes is going to have the grappling advantage in this fight. And I think Curtis is definitely going to go ahead and utilize that to the fullest extent. I think Curtis is going to go out there and out-grapple Sergei Pavlovich. And I see him getting a finish in this fight. I think he's going to probably finish him by ground and pound or submission, something on the ground though. So I'll be taking Curtis Blaydes in this fight. So to recap, I'm taking Bruno Silva, Song Yadong, and Curtis Blaydes. And that's all I got for y'all.